Welcome everybody to our Saturday budget gear review live stream, and I want to thank everybody for joining here today. And we are going to cover very much a budget microphone. So if you're expecting something in the pro gear, this is definitely not the review for you, but you're welcome to stick around. This is definitely for folks that are on a super tight budget. So this is a less than $35 dual lavalier microphone kit. And it allows you to record to your mobile phone, to your camera, even to a mixer or a PA system. So we will let me give you, I guess, let's do you're not hearing it yet. Let me just be 100% clear. You're not hearing it yet. You're hearing this microphone for practical reasons. I want to be able to show it to you first, and then we will do an audio test so you can hear what it sounds like with two of us. And also in full disclosure, this was sent to me from JK, who is the maker of the microphone, in exchange for doing a live stream review like this. So they've been contacting me multiple times saying, hey, would you please review our microphone? I'm like, I don't have time to review your microphone. So we're going to do these kind of budget reviews, not every Saturday, but as often as we can. And the idea here is that I've had a lot of requests from people saying, hey, you're reviewing this really expensive gear. Can you please review some less expensive gear? So that's the idea with these. I don't invest quite as much time, so in these particular Saturday kind of budget gear reviews, but enough hopefully to give you kind of a good sense for how they sound, what their capabilities are, what their kind of pros and cons are. And so let's dive in. Let me show you this first of all over here on our overhead cam. So first of all, you can see there are two lavalier microphones. Of course, the first thing that will probably jump out at you is that these microphone heads are enormous. They are huge. And even if you take the foam cover off, they're still quite large. Let me just see if I can put it with some contrast behind it there. There you go. So if you're looking for something small that you're going to hide, this is not it. This is definitely something that goes on the outside of your clothing. Again, two lavalier microphones that terminate in a single 3.5 millimeter TRRS connection. However, you can basically switch it here so it can work with your camera that has a 3.5 millimeter TRS input, or it can work with a mixer or PA system. We'll get to that in just a minute here. There's an adapter, or it can go into your mobile device. And for example, with Apple devices, if you're using the Lightning to 3.5 millimeter adapter, that'll work just fine. So first of all, that's the two mics here. Let me just show you the way the cable is laid out is that you have this lead right here with a little control box. This box has a switch on it, and there's basically passive mode and active mode. In the active mode, you do turn it on, and it does have a little button battery that fits right inside here. Let me just pop that off. There you can see it. And it does come with, it came with, in this case, I think there were 3 batteries it came with, but you will want to, let's get it back in there. Here's the test to see if I can get it back in here and make it work for our audio test in just a minute. There we go. It's a little fiddly, but I think we got it. There we go. Okay. So there is the control box. It does not have any sort of LED to indicate that it's on, and it does not have any sort of LED to indicate the battery status. So definitely a downside there. But moving on, we'll come back to that when we talk about the pros and cons in a little bit. And then you have this Y in the cable right here with this sort of reinforced plastic piece, which is good because you don't want to have your two people kind of playing tug of war. And then from there, you have the cables that lead to each of the lavalier microphones. They, of course, have this actually very large alligator clip on them. So they can be clipped to your clothing, either a lapel or shirt or wherever you choose to place them. Let's see here. Jumping in here, it does come with a second set of foam wind covers. So if you lose one, you do have some backups there, which is nice. This little bag here had a couple things in it. So it had the 3 batteries that mine copy came with. And mine came directly from Amazon, so I am assuming this is what comes in the shipping copy that you would get. There we go. It's a test. So 2 of these are 377A batteries. They're very small button batteries, and I would suggest if you do go down, a route with a microphone like this, I would buy probably 10 of these to have on reserve, just so you can have that kind of peace of mind. I don't know how long the battery lasts yet. I haven't had enough time with it, but my guess is it's probably going to be, I would guess 20 hours or something like that. But that's entirely a guess. Next up, we have a 1/4 inch adapter. So this is cool because now I could go into an audio interface or a mixer or a PA system like a karaoke machine, and it powers itself, so you can run this set of microphones into that. So that's kind of cool as well. So they've really kind of given it some thought about the different use cases that you could encounter and made sure that you have everything you need for those different situations. All right. Now, I actually found this more helpful than I thought I would. So it does come with this sort of laminated or kind of cardstock laminated user guide, I guess. And the nice thing about this is it tells you how to set the switch depending on what you're going to be sending the audio to, whether it's like a live PA system, to a camera, to a mobile device. And so it just tells you how to set the switch, which is a nice feature as well. That just fits in here. And then, of course, it comes with this kind of semi-hard case, which we will close up here just so you can see what that looks like. Ooh, see, this cable is a little fiddly, I will confess. It's a lot of cable in here. And then it just closes up. Something like that. So that is kind of a visual overview. Let's go ahead and jump into our pros and cons here and show you a little bit about kind of my assessment based on I've only used it for probably a couple of hours now, did some testing with it. We'll run through all that. So obviously the headline feature here is that it's a less than $35 dual lavalier microphone. So, and it allows you to record directly into your phone, your mobile, like a tablet, into your laptop, into your camera if you have a 3.5 millimeter input, or into even a PA or a mixer of some sort. So that's really the headline feature. Convenience, simplicity, but it does have some downsides that we'll get to in a minute. Obviously, like most lavalier microphones, this does have an omnidirectional puller pattern, so it's going to pick up, of course, you'll wear it on your body, usually on your chest or maybe on a lapel. And what will happen is that the sound behind you will generally not be picked up, but the sound, of course, your voice and any sound around you in front of you will potentially be picked up as well, just like most lavalier microphones. I'll let you be the judge of the sound quality. We're going to do that in just a few minutes here. And then in terms of build quality, for a $35 microphone, it did seem to have the reinforcements at the important spots, like the little control box. Some reinforcement here as the cable goes into the lavalier mic. The mic head, of course, felt like metal. Everything seemed pretty good. For a $35 set of microphones, I think really quite good. So, liking that. Let's see here. As I mentioned before, it's really nice that it works with mobile cameras, recorders, laptops, PA systems, mixers. Lots of options there. And as I mentioned before, this cable is quite long. So from the Y point where the two leads for each of the microphones goes off, this is 18.5 feet for each microphone. That's 5.6 meters. So there's a lot of cable in there. And that's nice from the standpoint you could even, do social distanced interviews if you needed to do that. I would make sure that you sanitize everything in between shots, but that's actually pretty nice to work with. And it's a fairly sizable gauge of cable here. I don't know if we can see that there. It's not super thin, so it feels like it'll be pretty durable. All right. As I mentioned before, it includes the foam screens, the alligator clip, the case, the batteries. It came with 3 in my case. It includes the 1/4-inch adapter, so you can get into a mixer or a PA system. And that does come with that user guide as well, which I actually found fairly helpful. Now, as far as cons, there definitely are some cons. When you're working with a piece of budget gear in this price range, obviously there are going to be some things that you give up. So you don't pay a whole lot of money, but what you do give up is, first of all, size. This thing is huge. If you're trying to be super discreet, this is not the system for you. Those microphone heads are enormous. And probably maybe the biggest lavalier microphone heads I've ever seen. The practical noise floor. Let's go ahead and give you a shot. So I want to kind of disclaim this first a little bit. So just so you understand, let's switch over to Adobe Audition here. Let me show you something. What this does, this is not a self-noise test. This is actually a practical noise floor sample. And what I mean by that is that basically I put the microphone in a room I gain up so that my voice is coming in and peaks about -12. And then I record not only some dialogue, but also a portion where I stop talking. And then I bring that video or that audio file into Adobe Audition. I normalize it to -23 LUFS, which is the European broadcast standard for loudness for television. And then what I do is I measure that portion where I don't talk. And so what you can see here is that came in at about -56 at the RMS total. So let's see here. Yeah, so what that means in practical terms is that this is picking up more sound, more practical. This noise floor is sitting higher than I would typically like to see. But again, when you have two microphones, you're going to pick up more automatically. So it has that working against it. Of course, it also has that working for it because now you can interview. You can have two people mic'd independently. So this is one of those things again at $32.99. Is that, a deal breaker? Not if you're on a super tight budget. It's not. If you're looking for pro level gear, you're looking in the wrong place. So, all right, let's go back to our cons here and run through the rest of them. Also, one other thing before I kind of jump off the whole topic of noise floor. One thing to keep in mind too is that noise floor, again, that's not just self noise. That's everything. That's sound that's actually in the room. It's whatever you're plugged into. So if it's your camera or whatever recording device you're using, it's all of that. At a practical level, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that a lot of times in practical situations, the practical noise floor is going to be high. And that's perfectly normal. I think what you don't want is you don't necessarily want, depending on what you're doing, but if you're doing a video interview or something like that, and you're in a space where you normally would expect to hear a little bit of sound as part of the kind of experience of being in that room, you don't necessarily want it to be perfectly sterile, because then it almost takes the people out of the world that they're sitting in. So that's just one thing to kind of keep things in perspective. I know a lot of people kind of go, oh, I'm hearing a ton of white noise. Well, in a lot of those samples, you're hearing fans, you're hearing other things that are actually in that room. So there's just some practical things to take into account as well. All right, as I mentioned before, there's no power on indicator, so you don't know that you have switched it on necessarily. That can be a little bit of a downside. And so you will want to monitor with whatever you're recording. So you'll want to have some headphones and be able to listen in and make sure that you're getting the audio okay. It does not also have a battery status indicator, so you are flying blind. Again, you're going to want to use headphones to make sure that the audio is coming in okay. As long as it's coming in okay, the battery's working. What I would probably recommend, again, is have a good number of those button batteries on hand. And so if you're going to go shoot something that's really important to you, then I would automatically just switch the battery out at the start of that shoot, just to give yourself that assurance that you're getting a fresh battery and that you shouldn't have to, that shouldn't become an issue in the middle of a shoot. All right, it does require the button style battery, so that's a little bit of a downside. They're not that hard to source. You can get them from Amazon, or a lot of times you can find them at grocery stores or even petrol stations, or wherever you go. They're often available, but you do have to have them on hand. That long cable, while it's a big plus from the standpoint that it gives you some working room, it also can be a little bit difficult to manage. So just something to keep in mind there. And then something that's very important to keep in mind too, you don't have the ability to set the input level independently for the two microphones. And also what comes with that, the audio that comes out of these microphones is already mixed together onto basically a stereo track. They're already mixed and they're pan center, and you cannot separate them. So if you had a device where you could pan in post, or even pan while you're recording, doesn't do anything here. You're not going to get the one mic on the left channel and one mic on the right channel, or one mic on channel 1 and one mic on channel 2. It just does not work that way. So again, this is made for simplicity, for the person that's on the super tight budget. They want to do interviews or something, vlogs or something like that, where you have two people, each with their own mic, and this can hopefully fulfill that need. So, all right. So let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and take this thing out of its little case here, and we're going to plug it in and give you a little audio demo. So give us just a second here to get this set up. Incidentally, this is going to be coming into the A10 Mini Pro directly. That's how we're going to use it today. And I'm going to take one of the mics and Emma gets the other mic. So are you ready to do this? Okay. Okay, here's yours. All right, now she's getting set up. I'm going to get mine out here. Again, for now, you're still just hearing this microphone. We're going to switch over as soon as we kind of get settled here so you're not hearing all this jostling around. Oh my. Okay. You ready? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to switch over. Okay, we should be live on... Okay, there was a problem. Let me just check my settings here. Sorry about that, people. Okay, that should be microphone level. And we're going to turn it on to camera. Okay. Are we hearing it now? We're going to turn that off. Okay. That should be coming in okay. There we are. All right. Let me bring my chair back here as well.
Please watch the toes.
Watch the toes. Why are you holding yours?
I don't think this is microphone friendly.
Just clip it on your shirt right here. Is that okay?
Yeah, but if it jostles, I'm sorry.
No, not there. Like down a little bit. Yeah, just pinch it.
How about that?
Okay. All right, here we are. We're talking on the actual microphone now. And Emma is going to, you're going to interview me this time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about cassette tapes.
Okay.
I don't know anything about cassette tapes except that we have a cassette deck that lives on these shelves.
Yeah.
And there's one in my car.
Okay.
I don't own any cassettes.
Okay.
I don't know. Tell me about cassette tapes.
Well, cassette tapes are analog magnetic tape.
Magnetic.
Yeah, they're magnetic.
Okay.
So that's how they store the audio information. It's magnetic, charges along the surface of the tape. The tape moves across a head that can read those magnetic charges,
okay.
or whatever the right term is for them.
Uh-huh.
You'll have to excuse my lack of technical understanding, but
It's okay.
The idea is that you could play, they're two-sided, so in the old days, like the 70s, you would have to actually take the tape out. For most of the cassette decks or players, you would have to take the tape out, turn it around, and stick it back in to play the second side.
Mm-hmm.
But on the later generation tape players, it could actually automatically reverse and start playing the other side.
Interesting.
The quality was, there were very high quality cassette decks, and there were very inexpensive, lower quality as well.
Yeah.
And so there was a big range of quality. There was often tape hiss, and in fact, the interesting thing is that you've seen now, there are plugins to intentionally add that to music now.
Yeah. More plugins won't make you more creative.
No, more plugins will not make you more creative.
No.
Anything else you wanted to know about tapes?
No, but that's interesting because I actually used the deck in my car the other day, which I never do, but CDs and tapes in there sound much better than like Bluetooth streaming.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Much, much better. So I'm a convert to discs and tapes now.
Well, okay, time out. That Bluetooth transmitter we have is really cheap.
Well,
it's
then
not very good.
Why do we have it?
Well, because every car made in the last basically 10 years has had a Bluetooth receiver.
That one wasn't in that category.
That car's older than that, so. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So there's our little sample of the mic. Let's go ahead and switch back.
Okay.
Let me just move back over to this mic.
It's an awful lot of cable.
Yeah. It's a lot of cable, for sure. Okay. Well, let's see what questions people have. Let us know how you thought that sounded in the mix there. Apologies at the start there. What I had done is I had plugged it in without turning it on, and I hope that didn't damage or just make a really loud click. I apologize if it did. Sound Engineering 101, don't do that. Okay. Let's go to the chat here and see what we've got. If you do have a question, if you could just preface it with @CurtisJudd, that'll make it a little easier for us to find. And we'll definitely be happy to take a look at those and answer what we can about these microphones here. All right. Are the channels separated? So one on left and one on the right channel to do stereo, or to level and EQ the different voices of two people separately? No, on these they are not. So it's all already mixed. Both are pan center, and you are getting a stereo output, so you're getting a left and right channel, but it's already mixed. So there is no way to do anything with them independently in post. What do you think about the Rode NTG3 for short films? I use it together with a Zoom H5. Is that a good combination? I think it is. The NTG3 is a great microphone. It is. That's the type of microphone I think that you could buy and it could last for decades. Not only in terms of durability, but just in terms of the quality that it produces. And so I have no qualms about that. With the Zoom H5, the H5 needs a lot of output from microphones to really kind of shine, and the NTG3 can supply that. So yeah, I think that's a fine combination. Does the switch control impedance? No, the switch, well, maybe. What it does is it applies the self-power. So it, for certain devices you don't need power, for some devices you do. And that's a little weird to me. So for example, we plug this into the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, mic input 1, and for whatever reason it says, maybe it is partly impedance. That could be part of it. But for mobile phones, it says you don't need the power supply. For mobile phones that come with a 3.5 millimeter input, the microphone can be used directly. Interestingly, though, when you plug it into something like this or a camera or a mixer or a PA system, you do have to turn on its own power. So that's according to the user guide there. Could be impedance in part, but it's also, I believe, powering the condenser capsules in the microphones as well. If the battery run out on these, can you power it via phantom power 48 volts? No. Definitely do not apply 48 volts phantom power to these. I think you will probably destroy them or damage them. So you could, well, let's see here. I don't know, because the interesting thing is even for things like, cameras, it says to turn it on, so to power it on. That's a mystery to me. Like, I don't understand exactly why that is, because it would have been my assumption that mobile devices like phones and tablets would supply plug-in power, 3 to 5 volts, which is pretty standard. That's the same thing that cameras do. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there at a technical level. I think it's so cool that Curtis integrates his family in his productions. Thanks, Jacob. Now, let's be clear here. Emma is getting paid for this too. So she's in her sophomore year in college, and this is her side job. So, and yes, it is cool. It's good that I have help here. Let's see what other questions we have here. It had a buzz. I think just when the cable was on the floor. Interesting. Okay, could be. Could be. I know it did when we first started because I hadn't yet turned it on, and that's why you got that buzz initially. Once we started talking, yeah, could be that there still was some. So that's one thing too. For long cables like this, you're going to want to be very careful. Don't run them by any sort of power cables or any other source of potential, keep your phones away. And actually, that's interesting. My phone was right next to it the whole time. So that could have been a factor. in terms of the, hearing a buzz. So that could have been my fault there. I noticed that there was definitely a noise floor. I did notice some hiss, but when I did some of my earlier testing, but what I didn't notice a interference kind of buzz thing. So, all right. How do you bring up comments as a graphic in your live streams? Do you teach live stream production in any of your courses? Jacob, so a couple things. This is a little script that was put together by Aaron Parecki. Aaron Parecki has a YouTube channel. He does a lot with live streaming. He has done a lot of videos on how to live stream using the A10 Mini, A10 Mini Pro, and now the A10 Mini Pro ISO, I believe. And he wrote this little script, though. Essentially, the way it works is that when you're live streaming to YouTube, it's for YouTube in particular, when you go into the live stream studio on YouTube, there's a little chat there that's showing me, so I can see what's happening in the chat. You can actually pop that out into a separate window, and then he has a JavaScript that allows you to essentially key that in as a lower third like we have here. So you're using one of the inputs on the A10 Mini as connected to a laptop that has that chat. And he's written that script that puts it in a big window, and then that's keyed out and put on the lower third here. So go to Aaron Parecki to his YouTube channel and do a search for, I think, YouTube chat. It will get you what you're looking for. How big is the difference if you hide a DPA 4060 instead of one that made for it DPA 4071? Not sure I understand that question. I apologize. How big is the difference if you hide a DPA 4060 instead of one made for it DPA 4071? I'm not intimately familiar with those two mics, so I have a DPA. Gosh, which one do I have? I have one of the lavalier microphones that was made to kind of fit in a buttonhole. It's a good mic. It's an expensive mic, but it's a good one. And is that the 4060? I don't remember. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question. I better be just honest about it. I don't know the difference between those. Do you recommend the NTG5? Yeah, I have a review of the NTG5 where I compare it to a variety of other microphones, and I think it's actually, at the $500 range, it's probably my favorite shotgun microphone, I would say. It's the best one that I've used in that price point. So yeah, I definitely like that one. I do not, just for the record, I'm not a huge fan of the NTG4 or the NTG4 Plus. I just think in this day and age, there are some better options in that price range in terms of overall sound quality. So I generally would stay away from that one. But the NTG5 and the NTG3 are kind of in a different league relative to Rode's other shotgun microphones. All the others are basically kind of standard condenser microphones. And then the NTG5 and the NTG3 are RF bias condenser microphones. So they use a different technology. They're much more robust. They're the type of microphone that'll last a long time. They work in really, nasty conditions where it gets super, super humid, where a lot of kind of standard condenser microphones might start to kind of crackle and make weird noise if moisture gets onto the condenser or the capsule. The NTG5 and NTG3 will generally power through that kind of stuff a little bit better. So definitely a recommended one. Cassette deck plugin, yellow pencil with big rubber eraser for unraveling tape. Thanks, Rumbe. Yes. Yes, I do have some thoughts on the Zoom F4. So the question here, any thoughts on the Zoom F4? It's discontinued. Sadly, I can confirm that it has been discontinued, and that makes me sad. Doesn't appear to be any replacement as yet. That for a 500, I think it retailed for about $550. For $550, that was the best. That was a really good recorder. I really liked it quite a bit more than a lot of the other Taz, like the Tascam, like this, what was it, the 701D. I like the Zoom F4 quite a bit better, just in terms of its overall quality, sound quality, but also build quality, functionality. Just functionally, it was a really good recorder. Didn't love the screen, but that was one of those sacrifices you made for a lower price. But yeah, it makes me a little bit sad that it's been discontinued. I hope that they have a replacement for it at some point. What do you think about the Tascam DR40X? Is this a good idea for a beginner YouTuber or for podcasts in the future? Is there a better alternative at this price? I haven't used the 40X in particular. I would go and check. Julian Kraus has a YouTube channel. He has reviewed that one, and it's been quite some time since I looked at his review, but my recollection was he was not that impressed with it. And he's a very technical reviewer. Like, he has a lot of test equipment that he can actually give you some very specific information. But basically, he said that with the Tascam DR40X, one of the problems with the original DR40 is that it had fairly noisy preamplifiers. The 40X, I think the results of his testing were basically they haven't improved a whole lot. In that case, you might be better off with something like a Zoom H5, an H6, or an H8. But once you start getting up into H8 territory, that's where I would save up for something else. That's where I'd probably go for something like a Zoom F6, which again, that's quite a jump up. That's $650. But as a starter, and as long as you're okay with that handy recorder form factor, which is a little bit awkward for filming, it's fine for YouTube videos, by the way. If you're just sitting, if you're doing talking head like this, perfectly fine. Just put it on a desk or something like that. In that case, I'd probably go for an H5 or an H6. Lavalier sounded reasonable, but your Star Trek mic, the SR314, sounds way better and looks cooler. SR314 better than the SM7B for talking head streaming. I think it's going to depend on the voice, and it's going to depend on the room that you're in. You can see here we have some acoustic treatment here, so we can do something like this. If your room has a lot of reflections, I would probably opt for the SM7B over this microphone. This one seems to work pretty nicely for my particular voice. Better than the SM7B, I think. So there's kind of trade-offs for the two of them. In fact, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. U.S. Mountain Daylight Time, we have a new video going up that talks specifically about this topic. And the topic in particular is live streaming microphone placement and the types of microphones that you can choose for live streaming, kind of their pros and cons, and giving you some samples of how each of them sound in a pretty typical live streaming setup. So for example, here I'm sitting at a desk, so I have this massive sound reflective surface in front of me. I have a 27-inch computer screen right here, so I'm getting a ton of reflected sound, and there are kind of pros and cons to the different types of mics. The two that did the best, incidentally, spoiler alert, SM7B and the SR314. So anyway, well, if you're interested in that particular topic, tomorrow morning's video will probably be relevant to what you're looking for. So, would you recommend upgrading from the XM8500 to the Shure SM57? I'm not familiar with the XM8500, so I am not sure on that particular one. I will take a look. Can you make a video how to record phone calls with good quality, different methods with pros and cons? That's a good idea. I'm going to put that on the list. Kind of depends on the situation, but I think it's a good idea. And I'm just going to make a new note here. Recording phone calls. Sorry, that wasn't very ergonomic. But okay, we got that on our notes. Thanks for the suggestion. I appreciate that. What are your thoughts on using a mix pre-recorder to send audio feed to a camera like a Sony ZV-1 or Canon M50, send audio via the mini jack? My thoughts are it's a great idea for live streaming in particular, but also even if you're recording to the camera, the results are actually quite good. You're having the mix pre do the kind of most delicate work, which is the amplification of the microphone signal. The camera does take over the responsibility of converting the analog signal into a digital signal, but you can turn its preamp down, so you're not generally going to get a lot of color and noise from the camera preamp. So I think it's a good strategy. In fact, that's before I was using this setup here, which is more complex than that. That's exactly what I did. I used the mix pre directly into camera's HDMI output into a capture card, and that's how I did the live stream. So I think it's a good way to do it. This might be a good one for one person to wear both and get around problems if having to turn their head through a wide range. Yes and no. The only problem is you can't mute one of them, and so you'll probably get some phase issues if you were to do something like that. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Oh, I should also say they do have a single version as well, and we'll have a link to that in the description below. So they have a single version that's even less expensive. It's, I think, $28 or $29 US. The dual version is, I think, $32.99. So, but I would be careful about that because it's automatically mixing both of them. You could get a little bit of a funny phase effect, but you could try it, see what you get. Oh, thanks for the super chat from Camille. For about $500 to $750, what recorder, wireless transmitter, receiver, and lav combo would you recommend for a single-person camera and sound operator? So let's clarify here. Is that my total budget? $750 for a recorder, wireless, and lavalier? Whew. One of the questions is, are you open to used gear? If so, I'd get a Zoom F4, and I would probably get a Rode Link. That would probably be my choice. That's probably what I'd go with. The Rode Link is, that's an old system now, but it's still, as far as 2.4 gigahertz wireless mic systems, it's probably one of the better ones I've used. The transmitter and the receiver are kind of large, but overall, in terms of reliability and overall quality, that was one of the better ones that I've used. So that's probably what I would look at. If you're not looking for used, it's a little harder. So let me just go back a little bit. I would think a Tascam DR70 would be a pretty good choice there. So wanted to look in there as well. Okay. What are some of the best headset microphone options? My talent is complaining that his current headset presses too hard on the side of head, not comfy. Are you talking about like headphones with a microphone, or just the kind of the ones that they use like on the TED Talks? It has the wire hangers that go on the ears. Those are all, the wire hanger ones are nice because a lot of them you can adjust. And I don't know which one you're using right now, but some to look at. Rode makes one, a headset microphone, which is pretty good. From what I've heard, and by what I've heard audio samples from it. It sounds good, and I know that Rode generally makes quality stuff, and they usually have pretty good warranties. So that's one. I have used the, what's it called? It is called the Voice Technologies VT Duplex, I think. So it's another headset microphone. You can get it in different sizes as well, and it is adjustable, so you can adjust it to someone's head. But I think you're probably talking about headsets. And I don't know, I don't have a ton of experience with those, but one that I've heard that works pretty nicely, and it's really kind of made for noisy situations, but Audio-Technica makes one. I'll have to look up the model number, but it is basically a set of headphones with a cardioid dynamic microphone on it. So it's very good at eliminating or rejecting a lot of ambient sound. I don't know, headphone fit is a very personal thing. Depends on the person's ears, their head size. There are just a lot of factors, but there's hopefully some ideas that will help you at least give you a place to start researching. So what lav mic would you recommend for under $100 price point, and what will be the next jump which will have a quality difference? Under $100 lavaliers is a domain that I haven't played in for quite some time. I can say that once you go to the $150 range, the Deity WLav is there's actually a series of them. There's a WLav Pro and the WLav Micro. Those are quite good. I was impressed with those. For under $100, there was the first lav mic I ever really reviewed was, the second one, I guess, was the Giant Squid Audio Labs. That one's, pretty good. About $35 at the time. I don't know if they still make them or what they run now. Oscar Tech, OSCAR Tech has some. I have never used them personally, but all the audio samples I've heard from them and the feedback from people who own them, they make some that are pretty good. They're right around $100. They may be a little bit more, but those generally have sounded quite good in the samples I've heard as well. So that's worth checking. If anyone else has other recommendations under $100, there are a gazillion of them out there. Go ahead and leave that in the chat. We'd love to hear your recommendations. Was that a pun? I am not sure. I don't know, Hang. Yeah, it might have been. Not intentional, though. Any recommendations on sports broadcast style headsets? Yeah, the Audio Technica. Again, I'll have to get the model number, but they have one that, headset and a dynamic cardioid microphone on it. Really works well in noisy situations. Sounds good. Definitely one that I would check out if I were in the market for that. So I'll have to look that up after the live stream, and I'll put the link for it in the description underneath the video here. Have you noticed any difference regarding using XLR regular microphone cables versus using the thin, slim mic cables? Yes. One second. I need to go grab something to demonstrate this. I'll be doing a podcast on this one, actually. Okay, right here is one of the very first XLR microphone cables that I purchased. I bought it at a Guitar Center in probably somewhere between 10 and 12, maybe 15 years ago. It was not the cheapest, but it was also not anywhere near the most expensive. It was near the cheaper end. It did have Neutrik connectors, so that's typically one thing that I'd be looking for, but this microphone just cost me about 4 hours of troubleshooting recently. A recording that I did with this 3 weeks ago had this horrible, what looked like electromagnetic hum in it. So it was at 60 hertz and then 120 hertz and all the way up the spectrum. And I thought, man, what is going on in this room? Like, do we have some massive power source that's interfering? And in fact, when I did my original Zoom PodTrack P4 review, that was one of the things that I thought was a problem. It turns out it was this cable, not the PodTrack P4. So I pulled that review. We need to update that. And I'm waiting to post that again until I get my own copy of it. I actually purchased a copy of the PodTrack P4, and I want to wait till I get that, and then I'll update that review. But it turns out it was this cable. You can actually open up the connectors, and all the solder points are still good. But this has got that fairly thin cable. And what I noticed is the leads coming out of the cable into the connector, there's virtually no shielding. It's basically just rubber and then the wire inside of it. And yes, there's very much a difference. So I think the differences are twofold. Number one, you won't get the benefits of the electromagnetic and the radio frequency shielding, first of all. So you could potentially pick up more of that interference. And second of all, a lot of times some of that extra shielding protects the integrity of the wire inside the cable. And so they will generally last a little bit longer. That's my personal experience and kind of my hypothesis for how that works. So yeah, I think there is definitely a difference. And I would generally, if you are going to go with slim cables, buy as high quality as you can. So something like Mogami makes some thinner gauge cables, but they also put still some shielding in there. So if you are going to go for the thinner ones, buy quality. So you're gonna have to spend more money, but I think it's worth it in the long run if you're buying for the long run. If you just need a cable quick and it's going to be a simple job and it's not going to be anywhere near power and you're willing to take the risk, then yeah, buy a cheap one. But I think it's worth buying quality there. So that cable probably cost me $15 12 years ago. Now I have all my cables custom made. So my latest ones, I just ordered some from Alan Williams. Some of you may know. He's Sound Speeds on YouTube. He is a professional boom operator in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And he has boom opped on a lot of big shows, including Walking Dead and several others that you probably recognize as well. So he makes some of his own cables and I bought some from him. He's only doing it for a limited time. I think he's only doing it for the rest of this month, but and then when in other cases, when I need to buy some, there's a local pro audio shop here. They use Mogami cable and Neutrik connectors on their cables. And that's typically what I've bought before and had very good experience with those. So there's some thoughts on those. If I am setting up a podcast, is it necessary to have a cloud lifter with something like a Rode PodMic dynamic mic and a Zoom H5? I haven't tested that particular combination, but I think with the H5, my experience has generally been Yeah, that's one that's kind of right on the line there, where you probably will want something like a cloud lifter or a FET head. That's my experience with the H series recorders, but you don't have to. You can do some work in post, but you will probably lift the noise floor a little bit as well. So probably better if you could get a cloud lifter or a FET head. Let's go with that. Can you try your new double lav with G3 or G4 transmitter wireless? I could, but I don't have a G3 or a G4. I did have a G3, Sennheiser G3 wireless system, but it is now in the possession of my brother, who needed it more than I did. I may go ahead and buy a G4 at some point, just because I get requests for these kind of things. We'll see if the budget allows. So, Canon C100 Mark II XLR input or the Zoom H4n Pro, which would be your preference? Oof. Well, for simplicity, the C100 Mark II would, and the preamps on the Canon cinema cameras are actually pretty good. In fact, we're going, well, the signal chain here is we've got the Earthworks microphone going into a universal audio Apollo interface, and then that's going line out into the input on the Canon C200 here. So the preamp isn't doing the amplification here, but it is the analog to digital converter that you're hearing here. So I would probably go with the C100, would be my take. I have to buy a dual wireless lav system without compromises and any price. I am thinking of Deity Connect kit. Would you recommend something else? Yes. If costs or the price is no concern to you, there are much better options. I think Sony UWP makes a dual channel system that I think you'd probably be better off with. Let me explain why I say this. The Deity Connect is a 2.4 gigahertz system. The 2.4 gigahertz systems, the problem with them is, well, the positive is they're very simple to use, and you can use them in any country. They're legal to use in any country. The downside is, so they're advantageous for a consumer level product. The problem with 2.4 gigahertz wireless is that it doesn't bend around barriers and things in the way very well, so it's easier to lose your signal. And then also there's the fact that 2.4 gigahertz is shared with Wi-Fi. And if there's a lot of traffic where you're trying to shoot, there's nothing you can do to solve that problem. You can tell everyone to turn their phones off, blah, 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 but you still might not be able to solve the problem. And so you're kind of left high and dry with no ability to record at that moment. So that's the problem with 2.4 gigahertz systems generally, of which the Deity Connect is one. All the UHF systems tend to do better. And the nice thing about the UHF systems is that they usually have a wideband tuning. So that means you can change the frequency. So if you're having bad luck with one frequency, you can switch to a different frequency that's not currently being used in that location at that time. And also the UHF signals, at least here in the United States, for example, it's usually the 470 megahertz to 608 megahertz range. Those will bend around barriers a lot better, and they can generally penetrate through walls and doors a lot more effectively. So if price is not a concern, I would definitely look at the Sony UWP systems instead of the Deity Connect. Now, that's not to say the Deity Connect is bad. I'm just saying it does have its limitations. So hopefully that makes sense for your question. Do you recommend Backblaze? Well, I'm not an affiliate or associated with them in any way, except I am a customer of Backblaze. So that is how I back up all of my data. So I guess yes. Hi, Curtis, this is Tim. Hi, Tim. Not lav related, but I have an old Zoom H2 and I'm live streaming to YouTube using an iOS only system, and I'm sending monitor line out to a 7th gen iPad. Is USB better? I haven't tested that in particular. I would assume that USB would probably be just an easier way to work in that particular case. So I would think it's probably worth a try. I would do some testing with that, but that would probably be my preference, would be to go via USB, just because that way it's the H2 that's encoding it in a digital signal and sending it straight into the iPad, versus when you go line out and then into the iPad, it has to do first of all, it's going to amplify the signal again, and then it's also going to convert it again to digital. So it's probably just better to go straight in if you can. Just a cleaner signal chain would be my take. So thanks for that, Tim. How do you get rid of high heart rate when you record sound during video interviews? I use a lavalier. I'm always tense that something is going to go wrong. Level, crackling, and room sound. That's a great question, and I have definitely been there. It's always stressful. Wireless, in particular, is always stressful. It's really just experience. It's knowing your system. Get to know your system as well as you can, so that if problems do arise, you know how to solve the issue. Have backups in as much as possible. So if crackling, a lot of times crackling is a loose connection. So that can often be solved by, sometimes, like, for example, we had a crackling issue last week, I think it was. And what we found was that the micro dot connector for one of the lavaliers had come loose. And so it wasn't completely disconnected, but it was loose. And so we were getting this crackling noise. Tightening that up solved the problem. So just get to know your system as best as you can. Use it as much as you can so that you're just familiar with it and you know how to solve the problems, and you'll be in much better shape. So if your question is, well, how do I solve the problems? Well, that's what experience will teach you. And also, I'm in talks right now. Well, I better not talk about that yet. We might have a wireless microphone course at some point, just maybe. So great question. Appreciate that. Okay. I have a Rodecaster Pro. What's the very best XLR lavalier mic you would recommend that is on par with the Shure SM7B? Ooh, that's a tough one, because the SM7B has it's kind of a unique broadcast sound that most lavaliers don't have a broadcast sound like that. So, but the good thing with the Rodecaster Pro is you do have some processors which will help you kind of tune the sound a little bit. You have a de-esser, you have the big bottom. I would probably look, Sony has some wired XLR microphones. I don't know the model numbers. Sony is really tough with model numbers. I don't remember the numbers, but if you do a search for Sony XLR lavalier, I would do that at B&H, and you'll have some options come up there that are pretty decent options. So they're going to be pretty robust in terms of their build, and the quality will be there too. So they're not going to sound exactly like an SM7B because they are a lavalier. But if you experiment with the placement where you put it on the body, and then work on some of the processors within the Rodecaster, you can probably get pretty close. So, what live mic do you recommend for live performance, like a live speech in front of a live audience? Well, I don't know what the budget is that you're working with, but my favorite right now is the Shure Twinplex TL48. That's probably my favorite mic right now. There are lots of other options. DPA makes a bunch of different lavalier microphones which sound really quite natural. DPA mics tend to sound pretty natural. Countryman has a couple. The B6 is a very, very small one. So that's a decent option. Sennheiser MKE2 is a decent option. On the cheaper end, you could get one of these guys. They have the mono version. So again, JK Mic J 700. They have a single microphone version if you're going for the kind of the budget realm. So there's some thoughts there. I would also consider, if you're going to be doing live speech, I would consider a headset microphone as well. I know some people don't like those, but the truth is they generally sound better because as people start moving around and turning, sometimes they turn away from the microphone, and so you lose them a little bit. And also, just in terms of like audio quality, having a microphone up close to the voice, up near the mouth, will almost always sound better than having something down on the chest. So those are some thoughts there. Any thoughts on Anchor, the podcasting host? I don't have any thoughts on Anchor because I've never used it, so I apologize. I don't do a ton of podcasting, but sorry, I don't have much info on that. Is the cloud lifter necessary for the F4? Thanks from Iceland. No. Generally, it is not necessary. It depends on which microphone you're using, but the Zoom F4 can supply 75 dB of gain. I have not used a microphone that needed more than that really required a cloud lifter or a FET head. So I don't think it's necessary. Save yourself some money. All right, we have time for just a couple more questions here. We're doing a scan. Why don't we hear much from Electrosonics anymore? We actually do. It depends on where you go. A lot of the production sound mixers are still using Electrosonics gear. They make great stuff that lasts for a long, long time. And, there's none of that has changed. They now have their digital duet system, which is pretty cool. So I'm supposed to tease this. I can't tell you anything about it, but I'm supposed to tease it. We do have a review coming up at some point with that guy. But yeah, they're making top quality gear. They have their new duet digital system, and they're operating at that part of the market that's very much more expensive, definitely for pros. I think a single channel wireless system is going to cost you somewhere in the north of $2,000 range. But they're great systems. So we definitely hear, and we also, Carl Winkler, who is I believe, kind of the sales and marketing head at Electrosonics, did a series of, on the Electrosonics YouTube channel, did a series of wireless talks recently where he talks about a lot of like the history and kind of the basics of RF theory and, a lot of the practical things that come along with wireless and how to become a really good engineer and working with wireless. So definitely worth checking out. Did you already have worked with Sonosax mixers? I've seen one. I've put my hands on one just at NAB. I haven't used them other than that, but they're beautiful devices. And actually, Sonosax is still making new gear. They have a new recorder as well. I've been in touch with them. I'd love to try some of their newer stuff, but it's not really in my budget at the moment. They're very expensive as well, but very high quality. Are there any really good dynamic microphones for a good, decent budget that's kind of the Swiss Army for their value? I think the Samson Q2U probably falls into that category. I don't own that one, but I've heard a lot of people talk on it. It sounds really, really good. It's less than $100, and it has both an XLR and a USB output, so you have a lot of options there. It's definitely worth trying out. So I would say that's probably the one that fits into that category in my mind. How are we on time? 3 minutes. What are your thoughts on the Comica BoomX U? Have not used it. Perhaps paired with the Countryman B3. The BoomX, I have heard mixed. I have not used one. I've had a bad experience with Comica on a previous interaction with them, and so I generally don't review their gear. I have not been that impressed with what I've seen, and I've had people contact me having purchased the BoomX, and they're rather frustrated, and they're trying to solve problems with it that I'm not sure that they will be able to solve with the BoomX itself. So that's about all I can say about that. Do you recommend any phone apps for recording the sound from smartphone-compatible lav mics like the Deity V-Lav, or the JK Mic J700? On the iOS side, I do have some recommendations. We'll have to look to somebody else in the chat here to talk about Android. But on the iOS side, I actually use Rode Rec most of the time. So it's actually made by Rode Microphones, but it's a pretty good recording app. It gives you quite a few options. I have not had problems with it. Rode also has another app called the Reporter app. I think that one might actually be free. And then there's also Tentacle Sync makes one, an audio recorder app. It has integrated into it timecode. I don't, whether you need that or not. It's just a good, solid recorder on its own. But those are the three main that I've also used. Shure makes one as well. The Motive, Shure Motive, is MOTIV, it's a decent app as well. It's made specifically for its microphones, but it will record from any microphone you have connected to the iPhone. So those are some thoughts on that one. All right, this is our last one. Anyone experiencing noise with their NTG5 had a cycling static sound? I have not experienced that. However, I would highly recommend you contact Rode support. They do have a great warranty on that microphone. So if there's something wrong with it, they can help you identify it, and they will take care of it if it's a defect in the microphone itself. So hopefully that works out for you. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining today's live stream. I hope that was helpful for you. Get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.